get started. It's about a couple minutes after 1. First of all, we want to thank the media for coming and participating with us. We think that this is a monumental occasion, the 60th year anniversary, and we wanted, well, in 63, the NAACP sponsored 3 coach rides, a train ride, 3 coaches on the train, so Louisvillians would have the opportunity to attend the march. And what we want to do is to commemorate, and we have 3 participants who participated in the original march in 1963. We want to invite the media to join in, ask any questions, make any observations. This is a conversation. It's not a press conference. So we invite and want your participation. I'm Raoul Cunningham, and I'm president of the Louisville branch NAACP. To my left, we have
Connie Cosby, Raoul's friend, and tag along.
And to my right,
Deanna, Tinsley, a longtime friend.
now as you may tell, the 3 of us have been friends through the years. I didn't realize it until last evening. The 3 of us were original participants in the Louisville demonstrations in 1961, the first time they arrested us as students. We were all participants then. A 4th person wanted to join us sincerely, and that was Arnett Otter. However, he has contracted pneumonia, and his doctor advised him not to participate. We're also glad to have in the audience former Representative Mike Ward, who was active in 1967 with the open housing demonstrations. And his mother went to the march in 1963 and was active in the march on Frankfurt in 1964. We're also glad to have Reverend Vincent James with us and Raymond Verse, former president of Texas State University. As we think about the march, about 130 people from Louisville took the C&O train the day before the march on August the 17th and made the 18-hour trip to Washington by train. Connie, what was your experience on that train?
Why would you ask me that now? It was a good experience, but I was used to riding the train because as a little girl, we rode the train back and forth to Lexington when my father was in the service. My mother was from Lexington. But I was eager to look forward to it. I didn't really know what it all entailed, but because Raoul said it's something we need to do, I did it. And it was an adventure for me. It really was. And I was just glad that I was going somewhere. I was home for the summer from school, and I was glad. And we all got on, and I will always be indebted to Norma Shobe, Deanna's mom, because she fried chicken and had it in a box. So if Mrs. Shobe hadn't sent the chicken, we would not have had anything to eat either. So everything just kind of fell into place.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it goes back to the sit-ins that we were participating in here in Louisville. And I was at Central High School And we had a wonderful principal, Atwood Wilson. And he would announce when it was time for us to leave school and go and get ready for the marches. So the students would leave Central and Mayo and other schools and go to Quinn Chapel Church. And that's where we would gather in the church and we would say a pledge of nonviolence so that we could go to 4th Street and not be angry and not respond to negativity as we were marching. So then I went away from Louisville to West Virginia to school and marched there in Huntington for a little while. But so the culmination of all of that we had been doing was, for me, the march. And you know, I was just really excited and happy about it. It was before, the 60s were so crazy. This was before the real crazy, other craziness that with the assassinations and everything else that went on. So before that, it was about, it's gonna get better, it's gonna get better. We know it's gonna get better, it's hopeful. You know, and that was the atmosphere in DC. I mean, lots of people, I just remember being among lots of people, being very pleasant, being excited like I was excited. I remember carrying a placard, walking around carrying the placard and being a teenager. So I think it was a great experience. We did not get to hear Dr. King speak, so that was a downer. And of course we didn't know what he was going to say. We didn't know the impact of his speech, because when he was coming on to speak, we had to go back, get on a bus to get back on the train to come home.
We would have missed our train if they had not done that, and it wasn't anywhere for us to stay overnight.
Wow.
I stayed. I took the train ride out, but I was a student at Howard in Washington, D.C., and school was to start a couple days after the march. So I remained and did get a chance to hear Dr. King's speech. Although I heard it, I did not realize the impact of it. It was hot that day. I can't tell you, when looking at pictures, where we were in that massive crowd. I heard the speech, clapped, did not realize the impact of it until years later. Now, when Connie and Deanna talk about the fried chicken in the shoebox, let's remember that at that time, the train itself was segregated. We were in reserved coaches. The dining room was segregated. Now that's the same train that Connie, Deanna, and myself took to go to school. They were at West Virginia, I was at Howard. We could not eat in the dining car. So therefore, every trip that we made, our parents would fry up that chicken, put it in a shoebox, macaroni and salad, deviled eggs, and that was the way we ate. It was the C&O in Kentucky was segregated. If we had boarded or gone across the Ohio, those trains, when their laws were integrated. So that's just the background. And when you realize that we're talking about 1963, Louisville had already passed its public accommodations ordinance in May of 1963. The march was a march for freedom and jobs. Kentucky itself had not passed any public accommodations ordinance. So Louisville had. Part of the march was that evening, the leaders of the march, and at that time that you were talking about Dr. King with SCLC, Roy Wilkins with the NAACP, Whitney Young from Kentucky with the National Urban League, and other national organizations, they met with President Kennedy to push for a public accommodations of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. On the train ride back, Clarence Matthews wrote an article for the Louisville Defender that Reverend W.J. Hodge and Frank Stanley Jr. were so inspired by the March on Washington that they began to make plans on that train ride for a march on Frankfurt to enact a public accommodations ordinance. That was one, I think, of the major accomplishments of the March on Washington. It inspired. You had eventually the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act by Congress. You had the March on Frankfurt to push for a public accommodations ordinance in Kentucky. And I think when you look at that 1964 Civil Rights Act nationally, one of our congressional members from Kentucky, Carl Perkins, voted for it. Both of our United States senators who were Republican, Senator John Sherman Cooper and Senator Thurston B. Morton, voted for the 64 Civil Rights Act. As a matter of fact, Senator Morton was going to meet the train and the delegates from Kentucky. However, because the train was late, he had to leave. I think that's important in as much as Kentucky was still considered a deep South state, that you had your elected representatives voting for civil rights. And then as you turned up and looked at 1965, when the Voting Rights Act was passed, every member of the Kentucky delegation voted for it. That was Senator Cooper, Senator Morton, and the 7 members of the House delegation. Compare that to today. When our 2 United States senators will not support voting rights. I think it's imperative that we look and compare where Kentucky was
Where it is now.
and where it is now. Voting rights is still a major issue when you have had state delegations or state legislatures passing legislation to hinder voting. In Kentucky, there is an article on the front page of today's Louisville newspaper. The outcome of what can happen to felon voting rights. It's important. Chime in any point you want to. It's not a press conference.
Can you talk a little more about the Washington DC, the 63 march that went on, what you experienced?
It was very crowded, and being that I'm challenged height-wise, I couldn't see anyone because we were so far back, and I could not tell you where we were standing. It was that crowded. So it was a little overwhelming. You could feel the energy while you were there. But as far as, I'm looking at this program and I'm trying to remember the last person we heard before we had to leave. Did we hear Mahalia Jackson?
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
We did.
Okay, so we left right as Martin Luther was starting, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were there for most of the program. But like Raoul said, it wasn't until we got home and heard his entire message that we realized and felt the impact of what he had said.
I think also part of it was black leadership was at that march. And that was the first time some of us had gotten an opportunity. Although Dr. King had been here when we were demonstrating in 1961, and we had an opportunity to see him and hear him at Quinn Chapel.
Right.
But I don't know how many of us had ever heard Whitney Young speak, Roy Wilkins, A. Philip Randolph. They were all there. And to have seen Harry Belafonte, Burt Lancaster, Charleston Heston on that platform. Now, we weren't close enough to touch them, but they were there and they participated.
One of the things I remember is a group around me, and I don't know who these people were, kept saying, are we going to get to see Kennedy, President Kennedy? Is he coming out? And there was the feeling that he was not coming, that he didn't care, that he was not interested in this whole wonderful thing that was going on. Well, I was a kid, so I was an older kid, but I didn't realize that he was working on something. But at that time, I remember a negative vibe going on about the president. And of course, he didn't appear. But later on, there was action, and he, worked on the voting, was it the Voting Rights Act?
Voting Rights Act.
Yeah.
64 Civil Rights Act.
Civil Rights Act, okay. I was near the pool at some point, and I don't know how I got there. I mean, I just don't know. All I can imagine that it compares to is President Obama's
Inauguration, right.
when there were just so many people that you might not have a sense of direction. So that's what I remember. But I just remember being so positive and so hopeful, which is so sad in a way that today we're still hoping and still, it's never over. It's just continual. And I hope people realize that the fight is continual, that because there was the march, that was maybe a lead activity. But there's just so much that needs to be done. Also in the paper today is the story of Dosker Manor, where elderly and poor people live, and the place is full of rodents and
Black
mold and so poverty in Louisville still is an issue, and not just here. So the march is like continual. This goes on and on because we have, the fight goes on and on.
How old were you all at the time that you went to the March of One? Because I knew like your parents fried the chicken for you, so I'm just wondering too, like, how supportive were your parents in getting involved in?
Very
yeah.
supportive.
Very.
Our parents,
Yeah.
even when we were in high school, and that first day that we went to was Stewart's Dry Goods. Part of the adults were afraid for us, for our safety, not knowing what would happen. But our parents were very, very supportive. The first day that I got arrested, my mother, well, first of all, my family had a policy, as all of our parents did. You did not get arrested. I don't care. I would have rather faced the judge than to face my mother if I had gotten arrested. But that morning before we went to school, she had a conversation with me. Stewart's is not going to allow you to keep closing them. If you get arrested, you call me, I will come and get you. The next day when we went to court, she was there, my pastor was there, the NAACP was there, Deanna's father had said that he would represent us. Parents were supportive. Although we were in college in '63, we had started in high school, and the parents were very supportive.
So I was 19 at the march.
I was 20.
And I was 20.
Okay.
Mr. Cunningham, so you stayed and you heard the speech, but they got back on the train and went home. What did you stay for other days, or what did you do while you were there?
Did I do what?
How long did you stay, or what else did you do?
Oh, I stayed till the march ended.
Okay.
Because I know you were a student at Howard.
I was a student at Howard. That was my rising junior year. So therefore, there was no point in me coming back and turning around and go back the next day. So I stayed there and went to some campus activities after the march. Students from Howard, some of us had served as volunteers for the march the year before the march. And we volunteered up until summer vacation. I came home to work at camp, but I stayed up there until the end. And that evening, as college students, we partied. And we partied hard. But the march also had, I was a member of the debate team. And right after that, we gathered, we were the eggheads on campus. We gathered, and we were wondering how long it would take for segregation to end. At that same point, Congress had just gotten a raise for $25,000 a year, and we thought, oh my God, the thought of making $25,000 a year until we made it. But that was the discussion, the Congress and how long it would take to end segregation.
What does it mean for you all now, 60 years later, to be able to share your stories and share this history and make sure people still know what happened that day?
For me, I would remain as president of the NAACP. I serve on the national board for the NAACP. Realizing that today minorities are still under attack, whether it's voting, whether it's those who want to rewrite history and not tell it accurately. There is poverty. These are issues that still affect minorities, women, LGBTQ. There are issues that we still must combat and still fight. We are under attack.
I feel that the progress we've taken is retrogress. They've gone back instead of moving forward. I almost feel like I wake up and I feel like I'm on another planet. Things have changed so, and it hasn't been for the best. For those people that are disenfranchised, poor people, people of color. I feel America is in a critical time now, and I don't know if we will survive as a democracy because of that. We had made a lot of gains. People were violent then, but it would seem like the violence then wasn't as like it is now. You think of things that happened then, people would pull a gun and shoot you now for no reason. Knocking on the wrong door, being in the wrong neighborhood because they don't think you belong there. It's just unconscionable the way this country has progressed. And it's very, very disheartening because I am 80. And I do not want to close my eyes thinking that my children or their children's children are going to be at risk of surviving and living a full, productive life in this country because of the color of their skin. So it is very, very, we're in a serious state now. And I don't know where we're going to end up. But it is very scary to me.
Well, personally, I agree with everything Connie said, but another issue for me is, what can I do about it? And so you wanted to know, your question had to do with what was the effect and how personally, okay, so then what do we do? At this age, one of the things we can do is talk to people like we're talking now. But we've done that a lot since 1963. The three of us and others of us have talked and been interviewed and said the same stuff over and over again. We all, I think, contribute to scholarships for kids. That is trying to find out now what is the next step. What are we supposed to be doing now? Other than, bring it to everyone's attention. And then does that make us woke? That is that whole business of woke meaning something other than aware, alert, interested. That has just gone crazy. That's part of this whole scary thing about we're not going to teach our history anymore. And that's what you said, we're going backwards in terms of what we can do. So what do? Well, I guess we have to teach our children our history since nobody else is going to teach them the correct thing. We better do it. And we better tell them the story of the marches, the story of why the march occurred, and maybe they'll figure out what to do next. Because it's kind of hard for us to know.
I kind of had that question as well. I was going to ask, how do you begin to create that sense of momentum and energy and drive that you saw around the time of the March on Washington now in order to get people to want to push for more equality?
I think part of it is trying to get the word out. that was one of the reasons we wanted the media to participate with us today, to help us give the energy that the March on Washington gave, and to tell the story that, yes, we made progress, but it's not over. I think we all have a part to play, whether it's the NAACP, your church, the media. These are the components that we're going to have to use to necessarily get the message out.
And people have to vote for people who believe.
That's right.
You know, and now that we can vote, and it's difficult in some places, but we need to continually talk about who do you vote for? Who do you vote for who believes in what we believe in, who believes that we can go forward, who has some hope and some caring and decency.
Every vote has consequences. Reverend James.
I just want to say thank you to the three of you all, because I am a beneficiary of the struggle from which you stood on the March on Washington and continue to fight for civil rights. And because of you, I've been able to serve in some of the highest seats in government, in city government, as the chief community building under the Fisher administration, and now serving as the CEO of a predominantly white organization in the past. But because of your tenacity, your vision, and your hope for the future, you've paved the way for me, and I want to say thank you. And what I would love to hear from you is, what can you share with me and other leaders that are now in these different seats of opportunity and position and influence in terms of how we can contribute to what you all have already done? How can we support you more in carrying the vision forward for the continued fight through the struggle?
I bet you're doing it.
Part of it, I think, Reverend, is joining collectively and the community coming together.
That's it, the community.
It's no one organization can do it. No individual church can do it. But if we come together, the issues, like right now, and I will say that my two colleagues up here, Dr. Deanna Tinsley was with JCPS, and she was over student assignment at one point. Connie Cosby, a counselor in the high schools and junior high schools of the city. We've got problems with education. We've got problems not only on the bus or transportation, but we have got to ensure that our children get an education that they can utilize through their lives. Education is important. We've got health issues. Today, they're going to swear in the permanent chief of police. We have got issues. The DOJ report in Louisville. This is not nationwide, this is in Louisville. The contract negotiations with the FOP. These are all important issues that we have to deal with as a community. Now, what's the old hymn? The harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few.
Right.
And that's true of civil rights today, and it's true of our community. We need more people to get involved. And yes, every election has consequences. We've got to vote.
That means getting in your community
Yes.
and pulling the community together, which I think is one of the problems now. I don't think the community is aligned.
Thank you.
Any other questions or suggestions coming from anyone in the room? Well, thank you so very, very much for your participation. We appreciate it, and we look forward for continuing to work with you, and hope you will look forward to continuing to work with us.